Hi friends! Welcome to the Overcomers, a movement and a group of people who have overcome and they've got a story. That's what the Overcomers is all about. You sharing your story. Why? Because there is power in your story and people need you. They need your voice. They need your story of hope, faith, and inspiration that where they're at right now is not the end. They need to know if you can overcome, so can they. Today, I'm excited to share with you another story of one such overcomer. So let's go check out who it is.
Well, I'm honored to be here today with my amazing friend, Jenny Forks. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today on The Overcomers.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. I feel very honored.
So Jenny, in case you are tuning in today and you haven't had the pleasure, like I have, of getting to know her, a few things about her and her journey before we get started. Jenny is an entrepreneur, a mom of two, joining us from right here in Boerne, Texas. She's overcome a lot in life, from trauma to death threats, sexual assault, ridicule, and judgment, just to name a few. Now she's the author of Feet First, Braving It with Faith Alone. She's the proud founder of J Forks Designs, a successful women's boutique here in Boerne, Texas, and a lifestyle brand with products that are carried in more than 450 stores across 6 countries. So incredible. But what I'm blown away the most by with you, Jenny, is your spirit. You truly do jump feet first with your faith. And you did through some of life's toughest seasons, no matter how terrified you were, no matter the amount of ridicule, stress, and lack of support. You are bold, powerful, and such a beacon of light and love. You constantly show people that it truly is possible to get through difficult situations in life when you know your creator. So without further ado, Jenny, tell us your story and tell our listeners your story. I've
Okay.
gotten the pleasure of reading your book and getting to hear more of it myself. But take us back to the beginning. Take us back to when everything happened and tell our listeners how you went from that moment until now.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me today and letting me share my story with everybody. So I'm going to start with me being about 8 years old. That is when I accepted Christ for the first time at Vacation Bible School. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. And of course, when you are that age and going through that, you love Jesus. Like you have not experienced life. You have not experienced much of anything at that point other than you are excited and you think you know who Jesus is and you love him. So that's where it started for me, accepting Christ at 8 years old and being baptized in front of all of my family and friends and other churchgoers. Fast forward a little bit, I'm pretty fiery. To say it in a nice way. Independent, always have been. I grew up on a South Texas ranch. In South Texas, either everything in the land can either bite you, poke you, sting you, prick you, and so I'm a little prickly. A true Southern Texas girl. I'm so very proud of where I came from and having my roots right deep down South Texas, and goes back hundreds of years being here of my family. Um, Fast forward a little bit to high school times. That is when I started kind of coming into my own and realizing that, oh, my parents and I butt heads a little bit because I'm way independent for my own good. I like to do things on my own, my way, very typical A personality who's a little hot headed and, like I said, fiery. Um, so I found myself still involved with church and in the youth group and loving that, but also in a little bit of a rebellious stage. I was 17 years old. It was my senior year of high school. And in that rebellious stage, what do? We go out with friends when we're not supposed to, or hang out who we're not supposed to with. You start experiencing and pushing those boundaries and pushing what you know better to do. But what ended up happening, I got pregnant at 17 years old. I was a senior in high school, wasn't even a couple of months into high school, and I found myself pregnant. Um, and it wasn't even with somebody that, I was dating. It was just kind of one of those things when they say you can do it one time, then you get pregnant. Well, you can. So I find myself pregnant. I didn't tell anybody for a little while because of probably just the shock and denial aspect of it, first off. Secondly, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I'd never been in this situation. I didn't really know anybody in this situation, so it was very confusing for me trying to process it myself. I decided to tell the biological father. This is now fast forward to about February. So I found out in October that I was pregnant. And so here we are in February. I have now turned 18. So I'm now 18, halfway through my senior year. And I have made a plan. Of course, it was my own plan. And I decide, okay, I'm going to tell him. And then that night, I'm going to tell my parents. I'm going to sit down and finally talk to them. Well, that was a Tuesday at school, and lunchtime, I kind of took him aside, and he kind of blew it off. And I had known him for years; we had been friends, and he just kind of was like, "Oh, everything's going to be okay. Don't you worry about it." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." A little bit of reassuring. We didn't talk about details or anything, but I was like, "Okay, now I'm gonna tell my parents tonight."
Yeah.
My dad is a fireman. He's a fire chief in South Texas. And on Tuesdays, that's when they have fire meeting and training. So I remember vividly it being a Tuesday, like, oh, well, I'm not going to just tell my mom by herself. I need to tell my dad too, especially because I was a lot closer to my dad and I wanted him to be there. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. It's not like it's going to change the situation. So I was like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Go to bed that night, and at this point, nobody at school other than the biological father knew. So I'm like, it's just me and now him. The next morning, I get up like normal and get ready for school. My brother is a freshman. I'm a senior. So he usually rides with me to school. But that morning, he didn't end up riding with me to school. And I get to school my normal time, and I park kind of in the third row back from the school. We didn't have designated parking, but we all had our own spaces we parked in. And I get there and I see this car kind of creeping up, but I didn't pay attention. And I'm going to get my backpack and things out of the car. And the next thing I know, I'm being thrown into the back of a vehicle. And I look up, and it's the biological father and his sister.
Oh,
And so I briefly for a second kind of took a breath, and I was like, what is going on? What are they doing? Like, I didn't think anything of it until I realized, like, okay, we're not going to school. We're getting on the highway. What's going on? And so I kind of was like freaking out a little bit and just like, what are we doing? Where are we going? And I will say, being 18 and a senior in high school, a little naive, but no world experience. So I'm sitting there
right.
like trusting the best in people, just like, okay, well, what are we doing? And then she kind of turns around and is like, we're going to go take care of this problem you got yourself into. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I start reeling at that time and I just start talking to God. And I will say, I probably distanced myself a little bit from God just because I didn't understand what was going on with me. I mean, I know what pregnancy is, I know what I was going through, but I wasn't understanding why me.
Yeah.
And so I still was going to church, but maybe not the best or closest relationship to him at that point until that moment in the car when I knew this is all I can do. What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so they take me to about an hour away, Corpus. Like I said, I'm from South Texas. So we're driving and we pull up to a clinic, and I see that we are going into an abortion clinic. And if there's one thing that I knew is that I didn't know what I was going to do or how to tell people that I was pregnant, but I knew that I was going to have this baby. And so
Hmm.
that was not something that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so here we are. And like the whole time we're walking in, and they're not really talking to me much. They're just sitting there talking to each other and whispering. I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, the thought came into my head, well, I'm 18. So they're going to question that me being here. So I can at least get in there and figure some things out. So I go up to talk, and the sister goes and grabs all the paperwork and sits us down. And I'm just like, what is going on? Finally, they start filling things out, and they were like, nope, we're paying cash. There's no insurance needed. I'm like, I'm like, what are we gonna like? Because I think I was under my dad's insurance at the time. So I was like, well, they're gonna call, like
Yeah.
somebody's gonna find out something. Nope, that's not the case because we were gonna be cash. Um, and then my name gets called to go up front with the nurse when you go to the back part of the building. And I get up and they start getting up to walk with me. And the nurse then proceeds to say, excuse me, are we related, Mary? I said, nope, no, we're not. And so that was the number one. God made me speak up and finally say, so they wouldn't let them come back. That was number one saving grace. The next thing was I get situated in the room and the nurse comes in and I said, I don't want this. This is not what I want to be doing. I don't know what to do to get out of this. And she immediately gets the doctor and they ask if they should call 911. Should we get the police involved? My second mistake was to say no to that. Looking back now, I would encourage anybody, if you've got somebody that's reaching out, let them call the police, let them get involved. I just was like, no, I just want to go home. Just get me out of here without this happening. I don't want this to happen. So the doctor is now talking to me and comes, in and is like, I can go out and say things. I don't have to disclose any information. This is your medical history. You're not related. Nothing has to be said. You are over 18, plus they're not family. And I just remember at that point, like, I don't remember what words were said. I just know that God sent him to listen to me and understand where I was coming from. And we
Mm.
went back to the waiting room and left. And he talked to the sister, and I was like, yeah, we can't do anything. And I don't know. I kind of started just spacing out at that point. Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. And we end up leaving. Well, the whole ride back, the hour drive back to school, like the whole day has now passed. And so we're going to get back to school after it's already let out. And I'm just like, what? I got to tell my parents, I just need to get home. Like, thank you, God, for getting me through this. Now I just need to get home. And so the whole ride was just very like quiet and just a very eerie quiet. And I just sat back there just in my head, like, God, just let me get home. We're a little closer. We're a little closer. And we're a few miles from school, and they pull into in my hometown. It's called Veterans Memorial Park, and it's where we grew up playing baseball and softball and basketball, and it's where everybody goes. It's 200-acre park. That's what it's known as. So there's wooded areas and scrub brush and all of this. Well, they pull to the very back part of this park where you can't see roads, you can't really see anybody. It is a school day. There's not many people there. It's cooler outside. And they pull up to a little playground area, and he pulls me out of the back seat of the car, and the next thing I know, I'm thrown on the ground, and he starts beating me in the stomach, saying he's going to take care of the situation
Oh.
himself. And at that point, I will tell you, I closed my eyes and I was like, God, protect my baby. That's all I remember thinking and saying. And after that, I remember kind of opening my eyes, and I could see like hands and elbows like swinging and fist swinging, but I didn't feel anything. Like, I don't know if it was a shock. I don't know. I know that it was a protection from God. I do know that, but I couldn't feel a thing. I couldn't feel anything that went on. And what made him so mad was me not reacting, not crying, I didn't scream. I just was like looking at him, and I'm like, I don't feel anything. Throws me back in the car. We get a couple of miles down the road. We get back to school. And of course, it's about almost 5 o'clock at this point. So literally, our school got at like 3:45 or 4. So a whole hour after school. So the only people that are at school are like some of the teachers and some people that play in sports or that stay after for a little while, and pull up by my car, throw my backpack off, and they speed off. I'm getting situated and I'm like looking for my keys, and I'm shaking because at this point I realize I'm alive, I'm okay, but I don't know what to do at this point. And all of a sudden I hear a voice say, Jenny, like screaming across the parking lot. And it was my mom's voice. And
Mm.
I look up, and my mom and dad are standing there with the security guard and the principal and a couple of other teachers that were friends. And they're up there at the porch. So the security guard, of course, I got to know really, it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. And I would tell him good morning all the time. Like he was our security guard forever at school. And so he noticed that my car was still there. My, sports that I played didn't start. He was like, what is this? Why is her car still here? And then saw that I wasn't at school that day in any of my classes, and then called my parents, who had no idea what was going on. So they're all at the school. They've called the sheriffs, they don't have a clue. So I come running. Now, the biological dad had a twin brother who was not involved in this at all. And I guess he kind of knew what was going on because they drug him out of class or after school, and he told them where I was. So my mom embraces me, and they were like, we just need to get you to the hospital to make sure you're okay. They now know that I am pregnant. I did not get to tell them, but they now know. And they are just concerned because they think I've not had an abortion. They want to make sure that it was done right and I'm okay. I tell them I didn't go through with it. I didn't have it. I'm fine. And so all of a sudden we just start crying. Like we just all start crying, and the principal I loved our principal. He was so very supportive. Hugs me, and my mom and dad are like, let's go to the hospital. We still, we just need to get to the doctor to make sure you're okay. One thing I did, the mistake that I made at that pure moment, yes, I was kidnapped. I did not tell them it was against my will at that point. They did not know. And number two, I did not tell them about the beating in my stomach at all. So that is another thing that I want to express to people. Speak up. Tell somebody at the moment, even if you're scared or you're like, well, I don't want to get involved. Yes, do it. So here we go, doctor. Everything is fine. Like I lifted my shirt to look, and there wasn't a bruise on me. There wasn't a red mark. There was nothing. And I'm telling you what, like, I know I'm pretty stout and I'm pretty strong, but taking the hit and a blow, like there's going to be something. There wasn't. And I knew God protected me. I knew that he laid his hand between my belly and those fists, because I didn't feel anything and there was nothing there. I can't describe it other than Jesus wrapped his hands around my belly and took every blow for me, just like he did for us. And that's the image that I see. And only, and like when I get to heaven, that's a question I want to ask. Be like, Jesus, I know you were there with me, but were you holding? Like, I want to know what you were doing. Like, so that's always that's one question I always want to ask. So, okay, now the story is out. That night, my mom and dad had our pastor come over and talk. So I'm pretty shut down at this point because they don't know what I've been through, but I do. So I am processing this trauma. But I'm one that also processes and takes everything in, and I don't let people in. And so that was another thing that I've learned with, here we are 24 years later, to let people into that trauma. At that time, I didn't. I just kind of listened. I was like, of course they called the pastor. Of course I'm going to get lectured, which I did. And that's just something, like, I just remember, like, they were so happy when they saw me and that I was okay, but now that's faded away. Now I'm just in trouble. Now I'm just getting ridiculed, or whatever I was thinking and reeling at that moment was, of course, this is how they're going to react, and that's not fair because they just got that thrown on them as well. So, but I was a teenager. We all go through that, we all know that. So I can't blame them for that, but I did shut down that night after that. And I knew, all right, well, now they know. So let's just get through this. It's going to be miserable for the next several months. I didn't go to school the next day. And when I went to school it was Friday that I went back to school. So that weekend was Valentine's. And so I go back to school on that Friday, and at our school, you could pay like $1 to $3 and they would deliver carnations to people in class with a little note. Well, that Friday, I got this flower from a whole bunch of people, signed it, like, we're here for you. If you need anything, let us know. So I was like, okay, it's not so bad. But it was those same people that sent all of those notes and were like, oh my God, we're here for you. Come that Monday, they were no longer there. I was made fun of. I was snickered at in the halls. I mean, just you name it. I went from being the top sports player and homecoming queen to, on one hand, I could count the people that actually cared and stood by my side. And teachers too. Like teachers think it's
Wow.
okay to make fun or like, oh, are you doing okay? And I'm like, I don't ask, I'm fine. Um, then that following week, the school board came at me. They wanted me to leave school, and I was like, what's your reasoning? Oh, it would be safer if, now we have an alternative school in the town I grew up in, and that's where all your kids that got suspended or had too many ISSs or weren't passing or were in drugs, different things. It was like the secondary school, and it was a totally different campus, and it was guarded and teachers, but it was, you didn't get to graduate or go to school with your classmates. It was all the troublemakers. So this, school board would take turns calling me into the office at the principal's office weekly at this point, for several weeks in a row, trying to convince me it would be safer if I left the school that I've gone to school with all of these kids, my entire life. It would be safer to not be in those halls and go to the alternative school. And I was like, really? But really though? And this is where I started handling things on my own. My parents and I had a very strained relationship at this point. They didn't know what was going on. Should I have told them? Yes, probably. They would have probably stood by my side and fought with me because they wouldn't have liked that. But at that time, we were strained. So I was like, I'll just handle it by myself. So I'm like, no, thank you. I was in the top, 10% of my class. I graduated with honors. So at this point, I'm like, what are you going to do? My grades are,
Yeah.
spectacular. How are you going to make me or tell me to go to the other place? You can't. And I would walk out of the office. And it was just, one of those things that, I fought him. I just kept fighting him on my own. And I just kept telling him, nope, not going. I choose not to do that. Nope, you can keep calling me in this office all that you want, but I'm not going to the other school. That kind of died down for a while. That was for about a month. They would call me, every week. It would be another thing. But my principal stood by my side. He would actually be like, well, they're going to use my office, but I have nothing to do with this meeting. So it was really neat, to know that. And then my counselor, I'll never forget, Miss Joy. I've known her my whole life, and she started with us in 7th grade until we graduated. So she stayed with us the entire time, and she was like, "You can do this. You've
Oh.
got this. You're strong enough." And so I would fight them. Um, Now here we are, May, and I am 8 months pregnant, and I am fixing to graduate and with honors and with distinguished honors and very proud. And they call me into the office one more time to tell me, we would like you just to sit in the stands. We'll just give your diploma on the side. We don't want you walking across the field. It was in our football field. And then they were like, you are showing pretty well. And what if you trip? What if you this? I said, I have been walking for 18 years. I'm pretty sure I can go up 3 little steps, walk across the stage and down 3 little steps and not fall down. And if I do, I know how to roll, And so I was like, no, I think I'll just walk across the stage. And they were like, well, you can be there, but just how about you sit in the stands or just stay sitting? And I'm like, no, I want you to hand me that diploma. And
Yeah.
so out of spite, I wore 3-inch platform shoes. I walked across the stage 8 months pregnant, and they just shook their hands, and I just smiled and shook their hand and got my diploma and turned around and cheered and took a picture and walked across. So they weren't taking that away from me because I worked too hard while going through ridicule and losing friends to earn that.
Yeah.
While this was all going on at school, the one place that I thought that I could turn was the church I grew up in. And when I say that it wasn't the best situation, it wasn't everybody. And I do not blame everybody in the church. It was a select group of people. But it just was baffling to me because I've known them my whole life. And one person in particular, so my youth minister was amazing, and he moved there when I was in 6th or 7th grade, but he left my junior year. Of course, he went to a bigger church, which everybody does in their careers. But so my senior year, we're without a youth pastor. So one of a gentleman that was also a teacher at my school stepped in and kind of took over the youth department and stopped me one Sunday morning and said that I would be going to a new Sunday school class because I was now a bad influence he did not want in the youth group.
Ugh.
So he sent me to the single mom Sunday school class, which I was like, okay, what? And I'm like, these kids I go to school with, they know I'm pregnant. You know that, right? Like I see them in school during the week. And then on Sundays, they're going to see I'm not at the youth group. But okay, let's go to the single moms class. And the next person that's there, yes, they're single moms, and I loved and adored each of them. But she's like 32 years old. And here I am, 18 and pregnant. And here we've got single moms that are either divorced with kids or they are truly single moms that hadn't been married. And I'm like, how am I relating to this? Like, how is this going to work? I will say I loved every single lady in there, and the lady that taught the class was our pastor's wife. When I was a kid, of course, Southern Baptist, I was like, "Oh my God, fire and brimstone!" Like my pastor's here. But his wife, they were super sweet people, and I got to know her on a different level, which was really, really cool. And she kind of stood by my side and checked on me, and so that was really neat to have that relationship and grow from just thinking, "Oh my God, it's my pastor; they don't do any wrong." Oh, I relate to them. So that did help that relationship. But I'll tell you what, like where I thought I could turn and people would be by my side, in the church I grew up in, I was being treated just like I was at school. I was ridiculed. I was snickered behind my back. I could hear things being said. And the people that were my friends would report to me, be like, so and so just said this about you and they talked bad about your parents and this. And I'm like, why do I even come here? And so I went because I was under my parents' roof. So we went on Wednesdays and Sundays, but I kind of distanced myself at that point and realized this isn't for me. This place isn't for me. Now, I do believe it's taken me a long time to get back to, hey, I want to go to church and have that community. And it's not everybody in the church, but in order for us to make a change, is something that we don't like, we have to show up and make the change ourselves. So now I try to tell people how I envision Jesus and how I want to treat people is, I see Jesus when I'm sinking to the bottom of the ocean and he puts his hand through the water and he pulls me up and he carries me to shore because he's walking on that water. And then when we get to shore, if I'm not strong enough to walk, he's going to let me lean on him. And then it's kind of like riding a bike. I have 2 kids. And so teaching them to ride a bike, it's like, okay, you're holding on to the handlebars and the bike seat. And they're like, don't let go, mom, don't let go. Whatever you do, I don't have training wheels, don't let go. And then you get them balanced and you let go of the handlebars and they're still going. You're like, I'm not letting go. I've got the seat. Don't you worry. And then they get stronger and they learn to balance. And then all of a sudden I have just a couple of fingers on that seat. And they're like, don't let go, mom, whatever you do, don't let go. And I'm like, okay, you're doing it. You've got it. And then you let go because now they're balancing, they're strong enough, and you have given them that belief in their self that they can do it. And so that's what I feel like. We walk along with Jesus, and but it's that poem with the footprints. You only see one set. Well, Jesus carried me at that point, and then you see me limping, and because I'm leaning on him, and then you kind of see his footsteps behind me because I'm strong enough to go out in front of him, and then I'm walking by myself because I've got him behind me and with me and within me, and now I can be strong enough to walk on my own. But who can now I help to let lean on? And so that's how I envision. Like if I was to meet Jesus, I'm like, is this right? Because this is what I see. And so I feel like if I walk into any situation, I don't care what somebody goes to, that's what I want to be for them. I want to let them lean on me till they get strong enough to pass that on to somebody else. So there I graduate high school, get through all of this. I'm working full time and just trying to get hours in to save money. And I have Hallie the end of June, 1 month to the exact day after I graduated high school. I have this precious little girl, and my whole world changes to love something that I can't explain, a love like any other. And so I just work all summer and I'm just learning to be a mom, and I move out of my parents' house and rent this little 1960s like single wide trailer, the back of our ranch property from my grandparents, and I go in and paint it and I make it ours, and it's Hallie and I's home. And the biological dad is around-ish, not really. Of course, in the springtime after all that happened, he apologized, and of course the second naive thing I did was, well, it's okay, like yeah, I understand you were having a bad day and I let that slide. I should have never, ever. It's okay for me to forgive, but I should not have forgotten what went on or dismissed it as easily as I did.
Mm.
Um, Hallie's 2.5 months old. Everything's going great. I get a call from her biological father, and his grandpa's having a birthday, and they were like, "Hey, can you bring Hallie?" I never let her out of my sight. I would, if he wanted to see her, the family, I was like, "Oh, I'll meet y'all at McDonald's. Oh, we'll go here." Well, this one time I agreed to go to this birthday party barbecue at his house. He lived kind of out in the middle of nowhere past our little ranch area, another like 15 to 18 miles. And for some reason, I didn't have my car that day. And I don't remember if it's something was messing up in it, but I didn't have my vehicle. And his brother and him picked Hallie and I up. And I do not like to be without a vehicle. And that's one thing that I will always have my way of transportation. But I was like, well, if y'all can pick me up, I'll bring Hallie. We get out there and the family is there. They're doing like a little bonfire outside and the barbecue and all that. I go settle in the house, get Hallie all situated. His mom comes running in, grabs her, takes her outside to introduce him. I mean, she's little. She's only 2.5 months old at this point. Um, at one point, we're an hour and a half or so in. She's acting restless and hungry. I'm like, oh, I need to go make a bottle for her. So I go inside and I carry her in, change her diaper, and get her bottle ready for dinner. And his mom comes in and is like, I'll take her. Can I feed her? Let me go take her and rock her. And I'm like, okay. So takes her back outside. Well, I'm cleaning things up in the kitchen area. And all of a sudden, I feel something cold and sharp in my throat. And I realize it's a knife.
Oh,
And it's just like, what now? Like, really? Like, this is really, like, I don't even know what the feeling was. I just remember going completely numb. Like, what? I thought that everything was going, like, what do I do? So my dad is a fireman. My mom was head of safety at the bank she worked at. So she has like some FBI training. They both have some training, which they then trained us. My uncles are all highway patrol. So I have training. At this point, I have no weapon, and a weapon is held to my throat. And I just know you go along. You do anything you can to get out of the situation you're in, and you just agree and you just keep going along. That's what I knew to do. And I was like, oh, what are you doing? Like, come back here with me. So I get forced to this back bedroom area. And it was really like dark in there. And if you're from South Texas, you'll understand what I'm talking about when we put foil on the windows, like to keep the sun out. So it was really extra dark in this room and cold because it was like a window unit. So this room is really dark and cold. And the TV is on and there's a glow from the TV. That's all that really is in this room. And I will never ever forget the sound from the TV to this day. The Mummy was playing. I've never been able to watch it. I love Brendan Fraser. I will not watch it, but it was playing. I hadn't seen it, had just been released, out on TV at this time, or maybe DVD, whatever it was. And it's playing. And so I'm just kind of focusing like, oh, what movie is that? Like, I'm just trying to act as cool and as normal as I can because I don't know what else to do. There's a bunk bed in this room and then like a chair. The bottom is a double bed. The top is a twin bed. So it's, a little wider on the bottom. It's one of those old black metal bunk beds. He forces me down on this bed, sexually assaults me. I'm just going along. I'm like, you know what? And then the knife glides across my arm and cuts my arm, and I can feel just the warm. And I'm like, I'm bleeding, but it's not that bad because it didn't hurt. And I'm just in my head, I'm like, God, just she's out there. I don't care what happens to me, but I need to make sure that she's okay and I need to get her home. And so I'm just like, go along, go along. And when my arm was cut, I was like, this isn't a joke. This isn't funny anymore. And I see the kind of glow from the TV in his eyes, and he is on something. And at this point, I have found out that he is dealing cocaine, and he does cocaine, and he does drugs. So all of this has come to light this whole time that I'm pregnant, and I know this. His family is involved in cocaine dealing. Like I have found all this out just over the last several months. And I see his eyes are very pinpoint. I'm like, well, he's on something. So he don't care. Like, this is going to go one of two ways and it's not good for me. And he just is laughing at this point after all of this. And so I take a deep breath and I'm like, God, I'm going to have to fight or I am going to die. So help me. And I just remember I reached up, grabbed the rungs from the top of the bunk bed, and I mule kicked, like take both feet and kicked him completely as hard as I could off
Mm.
of me. I get situated, get my clothes situated. He is thrown up against the wall. I can hear that the knife has hit and somewhere else. He can't see it. I can't see it. I'm not going to try to find it. I'm going to try to get out of here. And I just remember like fighting, and he gets up and he comes after. Well, I know to go for the nose. I know to start just hitting where I can. And I must have popped him pretty good in the nose because I felt something like the wet warm. I was like, well, his nose is bleeding. Just keep going after, and I'm going to fight you. Like, if you're going to try to take me out, we're going down together because we're fighting. And so I'm literally fighting him, and I get free because he's down and tangled up kind of between where the TV stand was and like the window unit, kind of trapped him kind of down in there. And so this is my chance. And I run to the door, get it unlocked, run down the hall, grab what I can, my bag. As I'm going by, I don't really remember anything other than Flash being down that hallway, getting outside, grabbing Hallie, who is now asleep in her playpen, which was under a tree. Nobody near her, which I was like, I know God let that happen. And the brother now sees me and sees I'm very disheveled. And then all of a sudden, we're out in the field near the car. I said, you need to get me home. And he runs to the car and gets in the driver's seat. And here the biological dad comes stumbling out, bloody nose and all. And we are now driving away. And I remember looking back and I'm like, please don't stop, whatever you can do. And yes, that was his family and that was his brother, but he didn't stop and he got me home.
Wow.
My parents were not home that evening, so I didn't go to their house. I went to my house and I got Hallie to bed. And this is where I should have gone straight to the hospital or should have called the police. I should have done something. But of course, I was 18 and could handle it by myself. And I took a shower. Hallie was in bed. She was safe. I looked her over. She was absolutely fine. And I grabbed a gun and I sat with my back to the bedroom door with all the doors locked all night long, just waiting for somebody to come up the driveway. Nobody showed up. I figured he either was, and it was going to be another fight, or he wasn't because I got away now and he's just partying, whatever it was, I don't know. He did not show up. The next day, my grandpa came to pick Hallie up because I had to go to work. I had a double shift at the little bar and grill that I worked at. And so I was getting ready for work. My grandpa comes up. I have covered my arm so you can't see where the cut is. I didn't have any hits in my face. You couldn't see anything. So the only really physical would have been the cut you would have seen, is so I thought. So I covered that up, bandaged it, cleaned it. He gets her, takes her, him and my grandmother watching her that day. I go to work like nothing, like, okay, I gotta work, let's just, classic Jenny is, let's not talk about it. Let's just forget it. And no, we got out of it. So I'm at work, and a couple hours into the shift, we did a split shift. So we closed for a couple hours, like at 2:00, we would close, we'd clean the kitchen, and we wouldn't open till 5 again. So we do a quick mop and clean up. And I worked in the back kitchen prep area. And I was like mopping or doing something, and we wore just t-shirts, short sleeve, that had the name of the restaurant on it. And I pull up and I had already said, oh, my bandage, I had like slice mark. I was like, I did it on barbed wire. I was climbing the fence to get to the horses, and that was a good enough excuse for my arm. Well, I didn't realize this. I pulled my sleeves up, like tucked them to start mopping. So, it was kind of like I had a tank top on. And all of a sudden, the general manager comes walking in, and grabs me. Jenny, what is this? And I swung, and I turned around, I almost took him out. I didn't realize my body was still fight or flight. And and all of a sudden he was like, what is the matter? And one single tear goes down my face. And I just, nothing, just leave me alone. He goes, why are you trying to fight me? And he goes, and what is on your arm? I said, I told you, like the barbed wire, something got me. And he was like, I'm not talking about that. And I look right here, and this part of my arm, he had bit me the night before, and you could see every tooth. It was like a purple, like a instant bruise. So you could see like the full round tooth. I was like, I couldn't say anything. And so he sat me down, and my general manager, and he said, you're going to tell me what's going on. And I immediately, I said, please don't tell anybody anything, but I'll tell you. So I told him my story, what happened the night before. He immediately went and called one of the owners, who called my parents because they were good friends with my parents. The next thing I know, we're going to the hospital and the sheriffs are involved. I was so mad at my general manager, but looking back, he was my best friend at that moment.
Oh,
He did
oh.
exactly what he was supposed to. So we go to the hospital. Yes, I have showered and cleaned up, but they still do a rape kit and an exam and check everything. And this is the part I think I feel most victimized at. It wasn't the, like, I mean, all of it. All of it was traumatizing. This was the worst of it to me in my own personal experience, was when the nurse shut the curtain after I've gone through all these pictures and all this exam that I don't want to be sitting here doing. And I'm like, you just shut a curtain. You know, I can hear you. It's not a wall with the door, it's just a curtain. And she tells another nurse, and this was the head charge nurse at the hospital. She tells another nurse she didn't believe me, that I wasn't crying or reacting how I should be if this was a real situation. And I was like, okay, first off, I'm not a crier, and it doesn't matter what I go through, unless it's a movie where the dog dies, you're not going to catch me crying. I'm just not that personality. And number two, who are you to say how I should react to something? And so in my head, I just got this very distaste of immediately everything that was going on. I'm like, why am I even here? What does it matter? Nobody believes me. And I go back to being the kid that was pregnant in high school and at church, where nobody cares, nobody believes. Why even follow through? This is why I don't tell people things, and this is why I handle things by myself. The sheriff that was involved in my case, I am still dear friends with to this day. And he stood by my side at every avenue of this. After this whole, I never told my parents about the nurse thing till years later, and they were just as mad as I was. And if you know me, you know that I love like Law and Order SVU, because they're bringing stories to light, and it's like when you've been through it, I'm like, if y'all would just watch Olivia Benson, she said not everybody reacts the same. And that's my justification. No, but in all honesty, you can't predict how somebody in trauma is going to act or deal. And it is not fair to judge, number one, and number two, to even have a say so when you didn't go through it. And so I'm a huge advocate when it goes through, hey, you're going to walk through this, let's go, because I didn't cry either. I handled it. So long story short, my parents hired the biggest, baddest attorney they could help, and I couldn't afford anything, and they paid for it. And I will never forget, he was out of Corpus, and he did family law, and he was like a hero to me. He was like 6'8", not really 6'8". He was probably like 6'3" or 6'4", but he was huge. And I remember we are going to the courthouse because we are going after a sexual assault. We are going after taking custody. Like, we are going after whatever we can to keep him away from me. I have a restraining order at this point, but that kind of didn't really work. I mean, I was like, this is a joke. I mean, if I go to the store and he's there, I have to leave. Like, that was just not really protective. So we're at court that day, and he's trying to fight me now. Like, he wants a visitation, like all this. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You're not going to get her without me. And so my attorney, like, we're fixing to go in before the judge, and my attorney sees his attorney, and his attorney was like 5 foot tall. And so I just, in my head, I remember finding that very comical, because I'm very inappropriate in situations and laugh and when I shouldn't. And so we're at the courthouse, and I'm just laughing because my 6'8" attorney is with his 5 foot attorney, and grabs him behind the collar and said, let's talk outside. And the two attorneys go outside. I'm like, oh my God, where are they? The judge, like, we're fixing to be called in to have to tell my story all over again and again and again. And they come back in, and they signed everything. And the one deal that I did make, and I do not regret making this deal at all, is I dropped the sexual assault charges. And that was because he signed over all his rights to her. I didn't have to do visitation. I didn't have to do anything. And I'll never regret that. People ask me, like, well, don't you wish you had gone after the sexual assault? I said, no. I said, I've survived. I was fine. I needed to make sure that there was no access to my daughter. And that's what got it done. And so fast forward, here we are 24 years later.
So amazing. So amazing, friend. And I know there's so much more to the
Oh,
journey of
it's so much
like,
more.
yeah, of finding love and your kids growing up and also the success of your business, which is like unbelievable.
Thank you.
I wish we had another hour with you to
I
capture the full
know.
story. I will say this, like, I do think that this will not be the last time that we are on this show together. And to our listeners too, you absolutely need to buy her book to hear more of the meat of this journey and this story. But Jenny, listening to you even share, it personally, like it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to know you as a friend and to be having that pleasure of getting to know more of your heart. But hearing you share, it personally, what you went through in these moments of your story, there was something so cool hitting me about how courageous you have been your entire life. It took so much courage to navigate every single one of these moments. And especially when like you look back and you see people like your principal, you see people like your counselor, you see people like your pastor's wife, people who chose to see who you truly are. They became your advocates. They chose to see that you're a human being and you're an incredible person outside of what you're having to deal with in life. They became your cheerleaders. And how beautiful is that in comparison to what everybody else was treating you like? That's where all this courage had to say, you know what? The ones who believe in me are the ones who truly know me. And that's what I'm going to listen to. That's the echo of my creator's heart, who also put his hands around my belly when I was needing help. So it's so amazing to me that you found the courage in every single one of those moments in life to say, no, I'm going to listen to these voices and not these. To heck with these voices. So I have a question for you as we kind of wrap up today. And my question for you is, for especially our listeners who they might see this, on social media, or they might see it on YouTube and see the title or listen to the intro and relate to your journey. Maybe they too are facing ridicule for something in their life. Maybe they, as well have had an early pregnancy at a really young age in life. What would you tell that woman today if you could be sitting right in front of her and she's saying to herself as she's listening to your story, I wish I had courage like that. How can I have courage like that to navigate what I've got to navigate right now? What would you say to her?
I would say you are a survivor,
Mm-hmm.
and don't ever look at yourself as a victim. And once you become a survivor mentality, it will give you the courage to get through. And then ask for support. It is not asking for help. It does not mean you're helpless. It means that those of us that want to be here for you, whether we know you or not, want to support you, want to encourage you, want to be your strength when you're broken so that someday you can be somebody else's strength. Because the only thing I hope from my story is that it becomes a roadmap for somebody else how to get there, believe in themselves, and know I'm here for them. And I don't care where you are, where you live. I'm a phone call away. I'm an email away. I'm a flight away. And my goal is to help bring survivors together and know that when we link arms, and I'll take you back to when I was a kid, we played a game called Red Rover, and we linked arms, and it was always us girls against the boys for some reason at my school. But when we link arms and we are shoulder to shoulder, nobody can break through us. And God standing behind us, who would want to try to go through us? So we are here for you. And it's not just me. There are other survivors out there, and we are always here. And the door is always open. The phone call is always there, and just call.
So good. So good. When you think about those actual resources that were so pivotal for you, I want to make sure we give our listeners who might be like, yeah, I guess I do need to do that. Maybe I do need to link arms with people like Jenny. What would you point them to?
Those that have been through actual domestic violence or sexual assault. So here in Texas, I sit on the board for the Kendall County Women's Shelter. Now we help women, men, children, old, young, it doesn't matter, but it is the Kendall County Women's Shelter. And that is our top priority, is to link arms with you and get you through it. And if you are not suited to be where we are, we take people from all over the country. Just because we're here in the Hill Country doesn't mean you can't come from Oregon or Washington or New York. We are here. Find somebody or something like that. They're all over the place, but just reach out. And that's the one thing, us survivors, we've got a pocket full of information of what do you need. I can at least point you in the right direction. And it just takes reaching out and talking. That was the one thing, being young, I thought I could handle it on my own. I think I did pretty good, but I wasn't on my own. I had God. The first and foremost is realizing he's your armor. He's standing right behind you, and he will place the right people in your life. All you have to do is ask him. After that, start using those resources. Don't bottle it up. You should never be embarrassed. I'm going to teach you how to tell your story where nobody can use it against you. And that's the one thing, is here we are 24 years later, and in 24 years later, and in 2020, God kept poking me and said, it's time to tell your story. It's time to tell your story. I didn't know what that meant. And then that was July of 2020. And then December of 2020, I was on my first podcast, and it was called Jesus Talks by a really good friend of mine who wanted to interview me. And it was the first time I told my story. And then came the book. And now it's just word out of it doesn't matter where it is. I'm supposed to tell my story to guide others.
So good. And you're doing exactly that. And you've done an amazing job. And here you are today, now sharing it with our Overcomers community and really the world. Who knows how many people are going to listen to your interview in time, friend. Seriously, so freaking proud of you. So inspired by you. And thank you so much again for taking time out of your day and your busy day. You're so successful now. I know your time is very valuable, but it shows your true heart. You really desire to help other women, and you're such a cheerleader for women finding help and being a message of hope in that. You're an amazing mom. You've been an amazing mom since the day your daughter was conceived. You have protected her. You have been her biggest champion, and it's such a beautiful story to get to hear and to see. So I'm just so proud to know you, and I call you friend now as I live in Boerne, Texas. So
I love it. I love it. God brought us together.
absolutely. And he can do that too for you, friend. If you are listening today, he can bring you those people in your life, like Jenny was sharing or saying, that you need to get through whatever you're going through. Thank you again, Jenny, for joining us on the Overcomers. And friend, stay tuned, as we know we're going to have Jenny back in the future sometime to share more of the journey and the story. And don't forget to pick up her book called Feet First.
Wow, wasn't that powerful? Do you have an overcomer story? Do you know someone who needs to hear this message? Please share this video on your social platforms and tag us so we know who you are. Stay tuned as we share more overcomer stories in the weeks ahead. We're looking for you. We're looking for the overcomers. Join us. Let's come together as the overcomers. Start sharing your story. We have multiple ways you can start getting involved and repping the movement, repping your story of what he has done in your life. And last but not least, if you want to learn how to overcome, visit www.dannyjohnson.com. That's my coach, and that's where I learned how to overcome. Thank you so much for joining with us today. We believe in you, and we believe in the power of story.